Good day, Internet. Bit of an exciting update for you. We have been very busy working on the Rotary rebuild project. So busy, in fact, that we got the thing stacked. So that's what this episode is going to be talking about. I took a pretty wicked time lapse whenever my buddy David and I were stacking this thing last Saturday. And let's just take a moment to appreciate it. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about before we start going over the time lapse of building this thing. Alright, so at the end of the last episode we were talking about how I was annoyed that my exhaust porting template wasn't getting shipped. So we finally got that in the mail. I guess dude's shop in Oregon where he makes and sells these, I guess he wasn't able to get into his shop for like 2 weeks because of snow and ice. They don't normally get snow there. So anyway, we got this now. I have done 2 practice runs on my junk housing, so these are no good. Look at all that. These are no good, but they were good for me to get some practice going before I took a die grinder to my real housings. So what I ordered was a template for a naturally aspirated Series 3 engine. And what I technically got, because of what they had in stock, was a template for an REW engine, which more times than not, those are turbocharged. And I'll explain why that makes a difference in a second. So, here's a note that they sent me. We're out of 13B large street ports. The provided EP2A template will be a better choice for your application. So, I like this shape. I like the size. I think that looks really good for matching with my intake porting. But what I wasn't sure about is how much... So this is already done, but imagine it's not done. The porting template really only opened it up downwards, and it didn't open it up top at all. And let me explain what the effect of that is. Here's my understanding. So you need to make this hole bigger no matter what, so that it flows more air. There's downsides to going this way, and there's also downsides to going that way. There's also kind of upsides as well. So you bring this port down. So what that does is it cuts into your power stroke. So your rotor is coming through like this. It's getting pushed by the explosion, and then all of a sudden, that explosion is just getting pushed out of the housing. It's not pushing the rotor anymore. So the more you bring this down, the more you are robbing yourself of power that could have been pushing your rotor. So it kind of robs you all over the power band. But if you're turbocharged, those extra explosions kind of prematurely exiting the housing can help spool your turbo. So not useful for me. It's all bad to go down for me with a naturally aspirated build. Now let's talk about going up. Going up, you introduce overlap between the intake port and the exhaust port. So that means that the exhaust is sneaking past here into the intake as the intake is starting to suck stuff in. So that has a bunch of effects that I honestly don't fully understand, but that's what gives you your brap noise. That's what gives you your lopey idle. And if you're naturally aspirated, that can be kind of beneficial because it helps, that explosion helps push, it gets the air started. It kind of accelerates the air on that next cycle. The explosion goes and helps. I believe it's called exhaust scavenging. I'd love to chat with you in the comments if I'm dead wrong about any of this stuff. I find it very interesting, and this is just my understanding from reading Google and watching videos. So, overlap can be good for a naturally aspirated engine, especially at higher RPMs because there's more pressure. At lower RPMs, I believe, it just kind of messes up your vacuum, which is why you get that lopey blip, 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 brap idle. So, going up on a turbocharged build does not really give you that benefit because the air that you're receiving is getting shoved in. A little fart from the exhaust is not helping that already pressurized air from getting in any better. So going up has no benefit if you are turbocharged. So generally, naturally aspirated up, turbocharged down. The port that I got went all the way down, and with my understanding that I just explained to you, I stared at it for a long time and I thought, should I move this? Should I adjust this? Should I really move it off of the notches that have been bestowed upon me by this porting template, and I decided to just a little bit. So here's the first one that I did, and here's the second one that I did after my skills got a little bit better. It's a little bit cleaner, and also I moved it up about 3 millimeters. So I don't know how much you can tell, but this slope compared to the sleeve, it kind of drops down here. I really had to kind of angle it down from the sleeve to get to where the scribe was. But over here, this one's a lot more flat, and yeah, I think it just kind of looks better. And I did a pretty good job of the bevel on this one too. So that's as much as I want to ramble about that. So we did our exhaust porting. Also, as soon as we were done with that, we painted these. So I made sure to do a good job scuffing these up, sanding them, and I pre-sanded all of these accents down so that they were nice and smooth. Then I painted everything, then I cured these in the oven to kind of help speed it up a little bit. That you are supposed to do that for this high temp paint. Cat. And then I kind of meticulously shaved off these accents, and I hope you'll agree, this looks pretty awesome. Friggin' thing looks pretty awesome. So what did I use to do that, if you're curious? I used this with 220 grit pads on it, and I made sure, so on these ones I tried to kind of keep the grain. This is sanded to like 220, and this is sanded to like, I don't know, I think like 400, 600. I didn't mind having the grain here as much as over here. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. What else did I want to talk about? I made a little list. Half bridge apex seal orientation. So this is kind of interesting. If you're running a half Bridgeport engine, you can use 2-piece side seals. If you're running a full Bridgeport engine, you have to run solid side seals, or else terrible things will happen to your corner pieces. So let me try and explain this and not butcher it. I just recorded it like 5 times, and I, could not explain this in a way that I think a human could reasonably understand. So here we go. Bridgeport. Bridgeport. No Bridgeport in the middle. So this is a half Bridgeport engine. On your apex seals that go through here, you cannot have a triangle end piece on a Bridgeport side. So we can run 2-piece apex seals, but the corner, let's say the corner is the end of my index finger, the corners have to be towards the middle. They have to be towards the middle. That means that the solid side of the 2-piece side seal is going against the Bridgeport, and that's okay. The reason that is problematic is that triangle doesn't have enough support where the Bridgeport is done, where that notch is done. It will get all wobbly and probably fall out within a couple revolutions, and that's not what you want. So that's a pretty cool perk of running a half Bridgeport engine. You get cool Bridgeport characteristics with how it runs, but you can also get good compression with your 2-piece side seals. You just have to put them in a certain way. So since you're stacking this from the front up, that's how I did it. The first set of apex seals are pretty straightforward. You put them in, and the triangle is at the top. That's very normal. But by the time you're doing this one, you have to insert the apex seal where the triangle is going down. That is complete opposite of what you normally do. And without super gluing the 2 pieces together, that is a common thing that you do. You take your apex seal main piece and your little triangle, you super glue them together in advance, and then you install it as if it is one piece. You just pretend it's one piece, and then when you actually torque the engine down, it's kind of hard to visualize this, but just trust me, whenever you tighten all the engine bolts down, it breaks the super glue and everything sits where it's supposed to be. So that's, the super glue is just to hold it in place during installation. And once everything is torqued down, it can be free, and it becomes free whenever you torque down the tension bolts. So anyway, that's an interesting thing. Kind of a cool half Bridgeport bit of info for you. The end play. So we tested our end play after we assembled the engine, and I found that it was too large. It was, originally it was 5 thou. And in thou, what the torque spec, what the end play spec is basically between 2 thou and 2.8 thou. That means you have to get it within a thou. Do you know how small of an amount that is? It's really small. So you check it by taking a dial indicator and sticking it on the end of this. And then you wiggle it back and forth and you see how much it moves. That's an oversimplified explanation, but that's basically what it is. And how you adjust the amount of play is by replacing or sanding down this spacer. So this spacer controls how much, some people call it end float, how much the whole thing moves in and out like that. So it's a very specific amount. 2.5 thou is what you want. Over 3, or I think they say 3.5 thou is the limit. Over that is technically out of spec, and if you get it too small, you will tear up your torsion bearings, because that's really what the clearance is against, is these torsion bearings. So, basically imagine there's the shaft going through the whole engine, and it is captured at the end, and there's 2 torsion bearings that stop it from moving in either direction. And that amount of play back and forth, where it can move between those bearings, is the end play. And it's got to be a very small amount. So, it was too much in the first place, and then I noticed that one of these torsion bearings, there's a tiny little dent in it, and I was like, it's probably fine, but I'm just going to put the old one in because it looks fine. So I put one of the old ones back in, and that made it smaller again. So it went from like 5 to about 3, but that was still too much. I really wanted it to be in spec, like perfectly in spec. So what I did is, unfortunately I had the front cover on by then, and I made the decision to mess my gasket all up and take it off. So I took it all apart again, and I swapped out the spacer for, so this is the original spacer where it was too large, and then I swapped the spacer out for another one that I had that I think came off of the 12A. So we're still running some 12A parts. I think the original spacer from the original engine that I was driving went back on the engine, and then I tested it, and it was beautifully perfect. So I'll include a little video of that now where I was checking it. And now I'm going to push it towards the motor, and we should see what my end play is. So I'm going to give it a hearty push. And that is exactly where we want it to be. So our end play is mint. And another test that we did, we tested the coolant system. So I got this. I went splits on this with a buddy of mine that has an RX-7 coolant system test kit. You bolt this thing onto the engine, and it allows you to pressurize the coolant system and test to see if you're going to hold coolant before you even take this off of the stand. So that's why this is still on there. You have to block off anywhere that coolant can exit. Small rant. This thing leaked more than... The engine didn't leak at all. So the engine passed with flying colors. I filled it up to 20 psi at 10:45 at night. And then the next morning, I looked at it, and it was sitting at exactly 20. Like, not a friggin' molecule of air left. Which is fantastic. But this thing itself was leaking. That's the last thing that I want to have happen when I buy something to test that it's holding air. The last thing I want is for my tools to be friggin' leaking air. And this was. So, god damn it, Atkins. Not pleased with that. But anyway, I torqued it down a couple extra turns, and then it held air properly. And then it sat overnight with air in it, and it didn't lose any at all. So, that's enough rambling, I believe. Let's get on to the time-lapse. One thing that kind of overwhelmed me, because I'm an overthinker, is what lubricants go where. So I actually made myself a little list of what lube goes where. So you can see I'm putting Vaseline on the seals to hold them in place when I flip the thing upside down. And I used assembly lube on all of the bearings. Alright, things are coming along pretty well. I'm going to interrupt the time lapse to nerd out over the Bridgeport. So I've placed the rotor on there. That's pretty exciting. The surface is nice and lubed, so it's fine if I slide this around. Check that out. So on a normal engine, with normal porting, there will be no air coming in at this point at all when the rotor is like this. But since we got the old Bridgeport, so what a full cycle looks like, it starts here, it starts pulling in air, pulling in air, pulling in air, and it continues to pull in air until this chamber gets to, trying to keep it on the gear, until it gets to about right there. So now we're into the compression stroke, and this is where the spark plugs go ba-bang! And then it goes boom boom. The explosions are pushing this surface, going boom boom boom, I want you in my room. And then by the time we get to approximately here, depends on where the actually, I wonder if I could spin this around whenever the actual housing is on. That would be cool. But the exhaust port is around right here, and then it starts exhausting. And exhausting, and it's still exhausting. Oh, I got it off the gear, but whatever. You get the idea. When it's still exhausting, this will start sucking in. So that is what people refer to as overlap. And if you have a lot of exhaust pressure, such as at high RPM, that can actually help push new intake air in. It can help push it along. But at low RPM, it just messes up your vacuum. At least that's my understanding of what overlap does. So anyway, enough nerding out. Let's keep building her. One takeaway that I've taken away from this engine build project so far is that syringes are friggin' awesome for delivering substances in very specific places. So here I'm using some Permatex High Tack in order to hold the coolant seals in place whenever the thing is going upside down. And whenever I put it around, I didn't actually do a complete loop of it because I really didn't want to make a mess. You can probably see in the footage, I'm just doing a bunch of dots whenever I go around with the high tack. I'm just going bloop, 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 just so that it holds the coolant seal in place. That is the only reason for it existing. So here you can see David's getting the side seals together with their associated springs. And here's the main thing that I screwed up during this engine build. So we've put the housing on. I have not really properly checked the corner seals on the bottom of the rotor. That's really important. I knew that that was a thing I had to do, and just in all of the excitement, I forgot to do it. So all of the apex seals did not perfectly go down on the first try. I had to take one out of there, and you'll see in a little bit, I'm going to go down there and fish in there with a stick. It's a little bit smaller than an apex seal. And then I'm going to turn it, and then I stick the apex seal back in, and she all slides down there all nice like. There you can see I'm being really conservative with the high tack. I'm just doing a bunch of dots, and that prevents it from squirting out and getting all over the place and making a huge mess. But it still does its job, so I consider that the correct amount. Here is the #1 reason why you want to have two people. See what just happened? That happened really quickly and went really well. That's because we had two people and we sort of knew what we were doing. The eccentric shaft has to get lifted up and then the center plate has to kind of go over it and then turn a little bit and then go down, and then the whole thing has to go down. It's this big synchronized thing that has to happen, and if you do it wrong, you can damage your bearings and damage stuff. So having 2 people for that part made it much nicer. Much, much nicer. Not once, but twice, I forgot to check the corner seals. So we looked down there, and we thought that they were good enough, but they were not good enough. So I took a separate video, which you're going to see in a second, where we hoped that they would all sink down, but they did not sink down. It was actually quite a nightmare. The triangle end pieces at the bottom ended up snapping off on, I think, 2 of them, and we just had to completely reset. We had to completely pull the rotor out of there and start again. But on the second try, we got it. So, learning experience. Alright, are they all gonna go down? 3, 2, 1. I don't think mine's gonna. Mine actually did go down, but the problematic one is that one right there by David's thumb. That one has a very upset corner seal. I don't think it was even close. So at this point, the super glue had broken on the little triangles, which would be fine if they were seated, but they're not seated yet. So we were kind of screwed. We had to pull the whole rotor back up, and it kind of sucked. So I skipped a little bit of video because it was boring. It was us just trying to figure out what the heck was going on and fishing all the stuff out of there. So at this point, we had a little bit of an extra conundrum. We had dropped one of the rubber corner pieces that go in the corner seals down where one of the bolts goes. And that goes all the way down to the bottom of the engine. So here David's trying to shove compressed air in there to get it out. That almost worked. Here we're trying to pull a vacuum on this tube and suck it out of there. But eventually what worked, and I was extremely impressed, this was David's idea. He took one of the bolts that's supposed to go down there, put some high tack on the end of the bolt, sent it down there, and then let it dry for a little bit, and then he pulled it out, and it was there. So that was really cool and really smart. Now that we have learned from our mistakes, we're ready to sink the apex seals again, and it went flawlessly. here we're flipping it over. We're going to throw the counterweight on it just to see if it'll turn over once without anything terrible happening. And it turned over without anything terrible happening. It even made a whoosh noise. Probably not a great idea to turn it around too much without the end stack on it, because it's I think the eccentric shaft is resting directly against the irons, but one revolution while it's all covered in oil isn't going to do anything. And we immediately wanted to see if the coolant system would hold air, although at this point I didn't realize that the tester was leaking air from the fittings and also the paper gasket was leaking a whole bunch. But after I fixed those problems, I let it sit overnight, and as I mentioned earlier, it held air perfectly. And with that, that is just about everything that I got for you. Right now I'm working on painting a whole bunch more stuff, like the front engine mount and the oil pan. The oil pan actually had a little bit of a crack in it. I really should be ordering a brand new one, but I'm going to try and fix this one up. Worst case scenario, it can be swapped on the car later if it ever fails, but I don't think it's going to. And I'm also painting the engine vibration mount things and just a whole bunch of other stuff. I want the whole engine bay to look pretty damn nice by the time I'm done. And there's a lot of gross stuff in that engine bay. So I'm going to be picking away at that, but hopefully in the next episode we will see an engine in an engine bay. That would be huge. Wouldn't it, buddy? Wouldn't it, dude? Thanks for watching.